What up, guys, and welcome back to Thomas Reacts here on the 360 experience with myself, Thomas Mabaso. So today we are still talking about Phala Phala. We are still talking about President Cyril Ramaphosa and the recent report that comes from the South African Reserve Bank that said that there was no perfected transaction between President Cyril Ramaphosa and Hazim Mustafa, the Sudanese billionaire. Because, guys, if you remember what happened there in Phala Phala is that there was a burglary that took place at the president's farm. A lot of money was stolen there, and people started questioning President Cyril Ramaphosa about this foreign currency that was found at his farm, and the president said that money belongs to him. It is legit because it comes from his business deal that he had with the Sudanese billionaire Hazim Mustafa, who happened to buy 20 buffaloes from him. But recently, guys, the South African Reserve Bank have released a statement and have released a report. It is not even a full report because they said they are not going to release the full report on Phala Phala. They've released a report saying that there was no perfected transaction between President Cyril Ramaphosa and the Sudanese billionaire. And at the same time, the buffaloes that were supposedly bought were never actually delivered to Hazim Mustafa. So this whole thing is confusing people. We are trying to understand what's happening because the president took months walking around South Africa telling people that money is his. It comes from the Sudanese billionaire. But right now, the South African Reserve Bank is saying otherwise. So guys, today I have this video right here from Walsh and Mightie Jamie, and they are breaking down what's really happening there in Phala Phala. I think it is one of the most important video, guys. I hope that you stay until it is done. Let's hear what Mightie Jamie and Walsh has for us today. They're gonna start with the advert.
South African Reserve Bank has made findings about the money which was stored and stolen from the Phala Phala farm, which is owned by President Cyril Ramaphosa. And those findings have left people frustrated, confused, bewildered, bemused, and fundamentally questioning the credibility of those findings. Let's talk about it. So, what did the Reserve Bank actually say? This is the crux of it. They said, on the facts available to it, the South African Reserve Bank finds there was no perfected transaction, and thus the South African Reserve Bank cannot conclude that there was any contravention of the exchange control regulations. That's what they said. By Ntabanyoni Estates, and for that matter by the president. That is because the South African Reserve Bank concluded that the transaction in question was subject to conditions precedent which were not fulfilled, and there was no legal entitlement within the meaning of Regulation 6.1 on the part of Ntabanyoni Estates to the foreign currency. This is very, very, very confusing legal language. Basically what they were saying is that the elements of the contract were not fulfilled, and therefore there was no transaction between the president and Hazim Mustafa. That's what the Reserve Bank was saying. And because of all of that, they said there's no violation of Regulation 6.1. And you may be confused because you may be thinking, what is Regulation 6.1? What does it say? This is what Regulation 6.1 says. Every resident in the Republic who becomes entitled to sell or to procure the sale of any foreign currency shall within 30 days after becoming so entitled make or cause to be made a declaration in writing of such foreign currency to the Treasury or to an authorized dealer. So now that you know what the Reserve Bank said, and now that you know what the regulation says, let's talk about what this particular finding looks like at one level. And what it looks like at one level is that there has been no transparency and there's been no accountability.
Exactly.
Right? Why do I say there's been no transparency? The Reserve Bank said it's not going to make its report public. They merely released these 2 pages with one paragraph dealing with the question that everyone is worried about in relation to the Reserve Bank.
And guys, I don't know whether I'm taking it too far, because when I heard the Reserve Bank saying that they are not going to release the full report, the first thing that came to my mind was that this is election interference. We are going to the elections in 2024. So why are you not providing South Africans with all the information they need so that they can make informed decisions, guys? That is the first thing that came to my mind. Isn't this election interference? Are they worried that if they release the whole report, President Ramaphosa might not be the president next year? What is it exactly? Are they hiding? Because if they're not going to release the whole report, the only thing that says, it screams that they have a lot of evidence against the president, and they cannot risk releasing that evidence to the public. God knows why. But for me personally, I feel like this is election interference, because I feel like people need to make informed decisions about the leaders that they are going to vote for in 2024. Even within the ANC, I feel like the ANC, they need to fight this, because they need to understand that if they don't understand everything that is happening, they might vote for Ramaphosa to become the president of the ANC again. And some of those might not have voted for President Ramaphosa had they known what the Reserve Bank said. That's why I'm saying, maybe guys, I feel like this is election interference. Isn't this election interference? Are they not interfering with our elections? Because if you're not going to tell us everything about our president, the guy who is running our country, how are we supposed to trust him tomorrow? Because clearly we cannot hold him accountable. Even the institutions that are there to make sure that people are held accountable are actually protecting him. So isn't this election interference? That's the question I have for everyone. Isn't this election interference?
Had tons of money in his furniture, did not declare that money, and everybody knows it. So did he or did he not violate the regulations which say that in 30 days you have to declare that money? So by saying that they're not going to release those investigation procedures, their legal reasoning, any submissions or statements that were made to them, any affidavits, everybody is left in the dark, and everybody is left having to rely on trust and trust alone. But that in and of itself is not transparent. What we have in South Africa is a constitutional framework which is built on accountability, which is built on transparency. And that transparency here, that standard, has not been met. So that's number one. Number two, there's the question of precedent. Precedent is what standard you create as a result of making a ruling or a finding. Basically what the Reserve Bank has said, if you have $1 million in your possession, US dollars, that came into the country without any clarification of how it came in, let's say you just know some Nigerian dudes and you happen to have $1 million that they gave you because you sold them a pen. As long as they did not collect the pen from you, it's fine. You can keep that $1 million. You don't have to account for it. That precedent is a precedent that is very dangerous, considering that South Africa has already been grey-listed on the basis of the fact that the international financial community said there's too much funny business going on with the money in your country. So for the Reserve Bank, the custodian of the currency, to come and make this kind of a pronouncement sets a precedent that I think many lawyers will say is a bad precedent. So let's underline that.
But guys, how is it okay for the president to be allowed to keep a foreign currency, such a lot of money, at his farm for such a long time? How is it acceptable? How is this acceptable, guys? Because the example that Jamie just made, like, it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. But it's insane. Because the question remains, who is the owner of that money? Because if the president said that money comes from Hazim Mustafa, and the South African Reserve Bank says there was no perfect transaction, then how the hell did that money get there? Who is the owner of that money? Because the president cannot claim it as his. There was no perfect transaction between him and Mustafa. And Mustafa did not collect the buffaloes. So how the hell did that money get there? Who is the who is the owner of that money, guys? That's what I'm trying to understand. Who the hell is the owner of that money? Because the president says one thing and the Reserve Bank says it says completely different thing. So who is telling the truth? Who is lying to South Africans right now? Because someone is lying. This is clear as day, guys. Someone is lying to us. Someone is lying to South Africans. Who is lying to South Africans? Because the president and his acting public protector said everything was above board. Everything was fine. It was a transaction between the president and this Sudanese billionaire. And even the public protector went as far as saying there was no conflict. President Cyril Ramaphosa is not conflicted in any way. Because people were like, president is using his status as the president to actually advance his business deals. But the public protector said, no, there's no such thing. So guys, how the hell did that money get there? Because the president cannot claim it now. He cannot. So did Mustafa just go to Phala Phala to leave $580,000 and just go? Or where does that money come from? No one is asking this question. Where does that money come from? Because if the Reserve Bank says it's fine, the president can keep that money. Okay, fine, he can keep that money. But where the hell is that money coming from? Because what the president is telling us and what the Reserve Bank are telling us are two different things. Who is lying right here? Who is lying to South Africans right now? This whole Phala Phala story, man, it's insane.
Now we've kind of thought about transparency. We've kind of thought about precedent. Let's go back a few steps. Because the story about Hazim Mustafa in and of itself is a version that was given by the president. It's a version. That's not to say that it's a real version. It hasn't been tested robustly on a bunch of platforms. If you recall, in the Section 89 independent panel, this issue of the allegations came up. Mr. Fraser, and if you go back to the reported paragraph 90, they say that the statements made by Mr. Fraser, which supplemented his complaint to SAPS and the public protector, right, suggest that the money was illegally brought into the country after the president's advisor, Mr. Chauke, collected the money for both him and the president on certain trips he undertook to the Middle Eastern and African countries on behalf of the president. Mr. Fraser alleged the following, particularly. Number one, the money was brought to South Africa by the president's closest advisor, Mr. Benjani Chauke. The money was not declared with either SARS or the South African Reserve Bank. Mr. Chauke concealed an undisclosed amount of US dollars in one of his couches at his personal residence in Hyde Park, Johannesburg. This money was later transferred to a couch in the president's residence at the farm with the assistance of General Rood. And the money was transported to the farm with the full knowledge and acquiescence of the president. This was the...
And guys, while that money was being transported around, were they using state resources to move that money around? I also need to understand that were they using state resources to move that money around? And if they were using state resources to move that money around, isn't that illegal? Isn't that illegal? Because how did that money move from Johannesburg to Phala Phala? Were they using state cars? Were they using state resources to move that money? If yes, isn't that illegal on its own? Isn't that illegal, guys? Right here, I feel like the president needs to come out clean, man. With this whole Phala Phala thing, the president needs to come out clean. This one issue, it's one issue that is actually going to cost him this presidency, man. This one issue, it's one issue that is going to cost President Cyril Ramaphosa his presidency. I think he needs to come clean. No one is believing anything right now. No one is believing anything right now. Because that I believe that if these guys are using state resources to benefit their personal businesses, I feel like it's illegal. I'm not a lawyer, but I feel like it's illegal. I think that it is illegal, man. I think it is illegal for a police officer to use the police van to move his personal belongings. I feel like it is illegal. So how did they transport that money around?
These were the original allegations. And the Section 89 independent panel made it very clear that they did not believe the story about the purchase of buffalo. They said in the first instance, it's kind of like a stretch to think that somebody came to South Africa on Christmas Day, a day where we're all having the festive. And on that day, so rather than everyone just enjoying their Christmas, this guy comes here, Mustafa, and he says, look, I want to buy buffalo and I want to buy them cash. And he just so happens to have $580,000 in cash on him. And then they said, look, it's not clear that this money was declared. This is what the Section 89 independent panel said. Before the Reserve Bank, before everybody made pronouncements, they said, this story seems incredible. Furthermore, they said that this guy didn't even take the buffalo. He didn't collect the buffalo. And in addition, the receipt that was given had no details whatsoever. It was just Mr. Ndlovu and, Mr. Mustafa, their names there. So Section 89 panel already said they don't believe this version given by the president. They actually said specifically that there are many issues with the version that has been given by the president. That's what the Section 89 independent panel said. Then, if you recall, the Democratic Alliance made a PIA request, which is a Promotion of Access to Information Act request, to SARS. And they said, was there a declaration of this amount of money when Hasim Mustafa came into South Africa? And SARS said, we don't have that information. On our side, there was Dololo declaration made by this man. Okay? So Section 89 panel says, come on, fam. Come on. Do you really mean to say that there's a guy who came on Christmas Day, bought the buffalo and left the buffalo and got a funny receipt without any ID, any passport number, nothing?
Seriously, so Mustafa just went to Phala Phala just to drop $580,000 there and to go back to Dubai or Sudan. It makes no perfect sense. Like, why would that guy come to South Africa to buy buffaloes and not collect the buffaloes? That's what I'm saying. Like, how the hell did that money get there, man? How the hell did that money get there? Mustafa did not come from Dubai to South Africa only to drop 580,000 at the president's farm and to go back to Dubai with nothing. It makes no sense. It makes no sense. So why are people not asking the President Ramaphosa, who is the owner of that money? Where does that money come from? Why the hell is that money doing there? Because you said it's yours, but right now the Reserve Bank said it's not yours. They are saying it's not yours. That's what the Reserve Bank is saying, man. It's not us. It's the South African Reserve Bank. It's not us. The president has been walking around telling people that is his money. But right now the Reserve Bank is saying it's not your money, bro. So how the hell did that money get there?
And then left the buffalo to collect whenever. What are the odds? Then SARS said, we don't have a declaration from this man. No declaration whatsoever. And now we get to the point where the Reserve Bank says the transaction was not perfected. And because the transaction was not perfected, they cannot make any determination. What SARS is saying is that, look, there was no sale of buffalo. Now we have to ask ourselves, how does the version hold up over time? With all of the additional information, how does the version hold up? Was the Section 89 panel more believable when they said it is unlikely that this money came from Hasim Mustafa because of the following reasons? Or is the version of Hasim Mustafa believable? Recall, Hasim Mustafa actually did an interview with Sky News, and he was on the channel showing them his documents, saying, if you look, here's my declaration, here's this and this. I bought this buffalo. He was wearing his Louis Vuitton or Gucci, whatever brand it was that he was wearing, to show us that I have money, But then, what documents was he showing those journalists? Because at the end of the day, SARS say they don't have those documents. So what I'm trying to
fraudulent documents, man,
get to with all of this is to say, in making this declaration, actually, what the Reserve Bank has done has put us back to square one in terms of questioning the version given by the president. Now, there was some reporting that came out in December from News 24 about Benjani Chauke, the president's man. He scored millions from the CR campaign and now travels the world on Ramaphosa's business. That's what the article said. And I'm going into this article, and it said in the article, that they gave, they said that the Minister of International Relations took a dim view of Chauke's travels because he often traveled to countries that had strained or difficult diplomatic relations with South Africa. So there were pictures here of Chauke meeting Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia, him meeting a variety of leaders, from around the world. And we're going to post that article just here somewhere on the side so that you can see the reference, but also go back and read that article and what it says, because News 24 was suggesting that Benjani Chauke actually was going around the world and meeting all kinds of people. And they were saying in that particular context, they were saying this guy is not a desirable candidate to be in the top 6 of the ANC. But some of the things that they said in December still linger on at the time of this recording. So now you go back and you look at what Arthur Fraser said. Fraser said this money came from Chauke. He got it when he was traveling through the African countries and in the Middle East, and he brought it to Hyde Park and he took it to Phala Phala. Then you read the News 24 article saying Benjani Chauke was moving around on the president's business, going to Saudi Arabia, going over here, going over there, and they had a problem, or they had questions about the money that he had and how he was using money at the December conference. Then you now go to this story from the Reserve Bank saying, how did this guy, saying that they don't actually think the transaction was perfected. What this does, it takes us back to square one to say, what really was the source of the money?
Exactly, man.
That's question number one. Where did you get this money? Where did you get this money? That's a fundamental and relevant question. And it's a question that speaks to the heart of the democracy. Because if we don't know the source of the money, you don't know why that money was given, for what particular purposes. Those questions still need to be answered, and they have not been answered. And I don't think that anything that the Reserve Bank has said right now takes away the credibility and the validity of those particular questions. Those questions still need to be answered. And this is why I think if you look at some of the actions being taken by political parties to get to the bottom of this, I think this issue is going to still remain in the South African discourse. Then finally comes the logical conclusion questions. If indeed the South African Reserve Bank is correct to say what they've said, what does this mean about the money? Does the money go back to Azim Mustafa? Does the money stay, whatever the remainder of the money that was stolen, with the president? Whose money is it? Whose money is it? These are questions that I don't think have gone away. And I do think that everybody who's looking at this particular report is left with more questions than answers at the end of the day. Exactly. So that's the commentary on the South African Reserve Bank findings. What do you think? Let's have a conversation in the comments. Yeah.
Exactly, guys. For me personally, the question that I'm very interested in is, where does that money come from? Where does that money come from? Because right now, the story of Azim Mustafa is not holding. That story is not holding. The Reserve Bank went against President Cyril Ramaphosa. There was no perfected transaction. The buffaloes were never delivered. So the big question that I have is, where the hell is that money coming from? And what is going to happen with that money? Is it going to go back to Azim Mustafa? But Azim Mustafa, the South African Reserve Bank, have said that they don't know where this money comes from, basically. They don't know where this money comes from. Or they know they are hiding it. That's why they are not releasing the whole report. So for me, it's like, where the hell does that money come from, and what is going to happen with that money? Because it seems like what the president and his public protector have been saying all along, they were lying to the public. And I feel like the opposition parties right now is the perfect time to actually hold the president accountable and ask him these questions. The president needs to go back to parliament to explain what's really happening, because right now I'm confused. I'm sure there are people who are confused, guys. What the hell is happening in Phala Phala? What the hell did happen? What happened in Phala Phala? What happened in Phala Phala? It can't be that the president tells us that that money comes from Hazim Mustafa, but right now the Reserve Bank is telling us there was no perfected transaction. So where the hell is that money coming from? And now what is going to happen with that money? Is the president going to keep that money, or is going to go back to Caesar? Give Caesar what is his, man. So guys, please tell me what you think on the comment section. Don't forget to hit that like button, and the most important part, guys, please subscribe. My name is Thomas Mabaso, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.